what we did on Tuesday of last week.
All right.
Last Thursday.
Right.
Have I got the?
Let me. I'm sorry. Let me give you.
Yep.
Well, give me a second here. Okay, Reg.
Okay. On the left-hand side here are the sort of classic positional powers in organizations, and I'll just quickly go through them. Legitimate power, that's your role in the organization, the CEO, the CFO, and so on. So you have authority and power by virtue of your role in the organization. Then on the organizational side, because certain positions can give rewards, so they have reward power. At the same time, they can give punishments, so we have coercive power. And then resource power. This certain positions within the organization are entitled to allocate resources in different ways. On the other side, we've got the personal power. With the referent power, this is how people see you as an individual. Do they see you as an agreeable person, a helpful person, a pain in the ass? How do they see you? And so depending on how others see you, you have different forms of power with and over those people. Now, here I'm showing expert power slightly differently to how some may view it, because I'm also introducing information power. Expert power is what you can do as an expert, and also what you can teach others. And that's a very important aspect of this view of expert power. Information power is what you know. And some people refer to that as expert power, but it is slightly different. You can have a lot of information about different things, but not be an expert. And you can be a specialist in an area without being an expert. And then the connection power, these are the people who you know. These are your sort of relationships and networks that you build over time. And so working with those, there is a thing called the informal organization, as we know. And the informal organization typically has all of those three: referent, information, and connection power. The expert power is quite different here because it sits between positional power, because you can have expert power and the position that goes with an expert, as we saw in the matrix stuff that we looked at last week. But equally, you can use your expert power in a different way as a person, and how that relates to the informal organization depends on the relationship between the person with the expert power and the referent power, how people see that person. So they may see that person as a really helpful, knowledgeable person who will give us some ideas and so on, or they may see them as really pretty awful. They try to control us and hide secrets and all this sort of thing. And so if they're the latter type of person, then they're unlikely to be part of the informal network that people use. And so this is how I've sort of differentiated that. I'll go through the 3 slides and then we can talk about each one or whatever you want afterwards. And so this expert power, if you are approached by people who you get on with and you want to do things differently to the normal way in the organization, then you become part of this informal or shadow organization. I prefer informal to shadow. Shadow is almost something that's the same as, but sort of changes a little bit depending on the perspective, whereas informal for me is different, and I'll show why. So we have these different forms of power, and we have many different types of informal networks. They're going on in different ways all the time. And even in our normal informal network that we belong to, if we've got something special we need or want to do, then we'll get and create another informal network to do just that one particular thing. And then when we've completed that task, then it will break up again and go back to its normal, in quotes, way of working together. And so this informal network is very important, because this is where Ross and I were discussing the other day. We believe this is a coalition power. When you read about coalitions, it's usually more in a political sense. But here we're using different groupings of people in this context. I'll come into it in another context in a minute. And we're forming coalitions. And through doing that, we have tremendous power to achieve things in different ways. And I've not found anywhere that I can find where coalition power is used in this context, but I think it's a very, very important thing for us to consider. Now, if we think of this in collaborative network terms, then this diagram, as many of you know now, is the sort of a network for Futocracy, where we have the work groups in a collaborative sort of multifunctional team. The yellow bob is the purpose alignment team, and the green is the executives. And so this is a network, and it can be connected to other networks, either within the organization itself, and the purpose alignment teams can either be one purpose alignment team, or in a big multi-organization, you could have different satellite purpose alignment teams who are working together in the different networks. But importantly, we've got this increasing, I think it's an increasing demand through the circular economy and other pressures to have more and more collaborative networks external to our organization, whether they're suppliers or whoever. And so we're now building this sort of a coalition of power through a collaborative network of networks. And now we're really talking about a very powerful form of coalition power, I would suggest. And so I think it's worth sort of exploring this whole concept of collaborative power, coalition of power, because as I say, I haven't found this anywhere else at all. And then just the last slide is, you remember last time I put up a performance management system in the traditional sense with the different powers. And I've now formed one from the collaborative Futocracy approach. So for example, we start off over on the left here with the statement of purpose. This is where all businesses start. And we've got the legitimate power, resource power, and reward power. These will never go away. They will always be there, typically at the top of the organization. And then we spread that into the business objectives, which then we form principles, guidelines, and processes, which are then linked to the personal power of the individuals within the organization. And I'll stop there for a second and come down the bottom. At the same time, we've got the operational metrics that are aligned with the business objectives. And as business objectives may change, so may the operational metrics. And these operational metrics come down to this collaborative network of work teams and work groups, whether that's just the internal or the whole with the external. And we have this coalition power now that's working on this collaborative approach together with the personal power. And because this is more driven by principles, guidelines, and processes in the minimal sense of the word, through personal power and coalition power, we start to get an improvement in commitment and engagement, because people are doing things that matter for them in the way that gets things done. The constraints are far less. They are able, through principles and guidelines, which are pretty loose boundaries, to develop their own way of getting these collaborative outcomes, which then comes back into the operational metrics. And we have this cycle of the work of the collaborative networks, the outcomes, and the metrics. So we have this performance measurement is done in a very different way, because it's coming from the personal power and the coalition power, rather than, if you remember before, it was the reward and coercive power that was driving compliance. So it's just another look at what we were talking about. So I'll take it back to the beginning and be guided by what your comments and observations are and questions.
So can I just start? I'll just, by the way, Reg, I'm on a bit of a timeline. I've got about 18 minutes before I've got to head towards the airport. Your referent power. So I've been thinking about, just human power. So if someone has got a stronger personality, if they're better at rhetoric, if they're more confident, there is a power in that dynamic. You get 10 people in a room and you're going to be able to, and they've all got the same status in the same level, but there's more power in that room. Some of it comes from knowledge, some of it comes from just their personality. Is that where you're putting referent power? Is that what you mean?
It's that's the driver of it. You put two mammals in a space and you've got a hierarchy straight away. I mean, that's well proven. And so that hierarchy of mammals is, we either like and enjoy that hierarchical situation because the charisma of the person, the relationships and so on, or we may even see ourselves too much in that person and therefore fight against that individual, or if they're very narcissistic. So that's where we're coming from. We make our decisions on whether we want to associate with those people from who they are, not what they are.
So when you say what people associate with you, you could also see how people see your power relative to them. That would be another one, or relative.
That's how they see you relative to them.
Okay. So I'm fine with that, and so I think you've captured enough dimensions. It's hard to capture something like power in 8 dimensions, but that's pretty good.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's another one missing here which we need to think about when designing, and that's dependent power. And that's another conversation, because I think that's an increasing dysfunctional process in society today.
So I just want to share with you, can I share a screen? Can't I?
Let me come out of here.
Just you've disabled screen sharing.
Yeah, it's all right. Just come out. Let me come out. Okay.
I'm going to share with you something which I do, very similar, and you've probably come across this before. It's social network analysis or organizational network analysis.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to. I still can't share it. Host needs to go to
Ross, can you give John the host so he can share his
screen? Just sharing us. Just enable group sharing us.
Should be able to do it now, John.
Yep. Do it now. So this is something which sometimes when we go into a new organization, the first thing we'll do is a social network analysis. And I'm just going to, I have to just double with you. So what we do is, so imagine an organization of 5,000 people or 2,000 people. They all get a log into a screen. It's a very simple screen. And the first thing they get asked is, who are the top 10 people that you have worked with in the last week or month or whatever dimension that we're looking at, right? And they get a pull down list of all the people in the organization, and they say, here are the 10 people I've worked with most often, or 15 people, depends on the size of the organization. Then the colored lines will say, why did you collaborate with those persons? Was it to obtain approval? Was it to obtain advice? Was it to obtain support? Was it just for social reasons, like informal reasons, right? So now what you have is, what you described is exactly as you described the different type of social networks which exist, or informal networks.
Absolutely.
Then the killer question, right? How important is this person on a 1, 2, or 3 scale? How important is this person to getting your work done? Are they in the way? Are they neutral? Or are they vital? And what that bangs out is you actually get basically a network which shows the informal and perhaps the real decision-making structure in an organization. And then you can see what's happening. You can see people who are if leaders are at the edge of the network, they're active. If there are people who are in the center of the network who've got a lot of betweenness, it means that they are vital and that they are the informal leaders or the formal leaders of the organization. People are going to the go-to people. Now, the people with a high betweenness, centrality between the networks, so you can see, the big dots where we got lots of connections and lots. You can sort of see in that particular network analysis, you've got a couple of silos, but you've got some interconnected one. It's where the connections are, where the people are densely connected, is where you can affect change. Because if you get them on board, if you can recruit them into your change, they're the ones that are influencing the organisation. So that I just wanted to share with you. Now you've probably seen this, you're probably aware of it, but what you're saying is about 100% aligned with what how I see. And of course, that's also a map. On that?
I'll just make a quick comment. I mentioned dependent power just now. And this type of network analysis, whether you do it through this method or whatever, these people are very important in terms of dependent terms, because you depend on them in order to achieve what you need to achieve. And they have tremendous power to stop you achieving. And they can do that by just ignoring your email, going on holiday and not doing it, whatever. They got lots of different ways of avoiding things. And this dependent power, I think, is the one that's overlooked and undervalued in terms of this network analysis and how we use networks. And the social networks are very good here to identify that type of situation, but nobody is exploring it.
And I really liked your terminology. What did you? It wasn't political power. It was what was it? Power? Something,
dependent power.
No, the other one, the cluster power.
What, the coalition?
Yeah. Coalition
power.
Yeah, I mean, I would have just called that political power. I quite like the word. I prefer the word coalition power. It's a good. It's a good one. It's a good one.
It took us, Ross and I, quite a time of challenging each other. It was a good session. We kept beating each other up over the head with a dictionary. Sorry, carry on with what you were saying. I don't want to interrupt.
No. I really just wanted to share with you to say I'm really aligned, and we're using that, and it is really, really powerful. We've gone into some pretty big organisations and done some. We've just been able to accelerate change by identifying who the informal leaders are, and the informal leaders are go-to people with that informal power, and really you can affect change. Now, sometimes the informal power and the formal power overlap, but often you find it's not. And the informal network is the one that's really, and if you look at social network theory, I mean, this, the researchers, they call it like a superstructure. Like you can take people in and out of the social network and nothing happens because it's a norm network. It's a norm.
You can change it
stability
very
network.
Quickly. You can change it very quickly. In the United Nations, when the smoking policies in Europe were coming in, I did some work with them, and they set up these smoking rooms for people to go and have a cigarette in the early days. And I said, hang on a minute, you're changing the whole way your organization works now, because you're bringing in different levels of people from different parts of the organization together with a common interest, and they're going to form real good, strong, informal alliances, which will change the way your business works. And they laughed at me. And 6 months later, they got rid of these boxes because it did exactly what I said it would, and they didn't like it. And so you can, by making these little changes, bring about all sorts of differences here.
Because once you understand that that's how information, that's how change, and that's how norms propagate and stabilize. And you say, if you want to change them, let's get a hold of the informal leaders. Let's recruit them, and let them become part. If you ignore them and you're working on the edges of those networks, it's going to be futile. It's absolutely, you're just wasting your time. So with that, I'm going to kind of just sort of let you go. Now, just on my talk, I was going to, I don't think I need to rehearse. I'm just going to jump on. My quick question would be, I've got potentially a 1.5 hour slot. Do you reckon that like a 1 hour talk or a 90-minute talk would be better on complex adaptive systems? I mean, I'm thinking closer to 1 hour, half an hour Q&A, and that call it that.
I mean, I personally aim for 45 minutes. It usually runs to an hour, and that gives half an hour to discuss. I mean, what do you think, Ross?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I try to target 45 minutes, and then that'll allow you to go with another Q&A, let the Q&A run longer if necessary. The key is to try to keep it at an hour and a half, no more than an hour and 45 minutes, to give you a 15-minute break between sessions.
Yeah, okay. So I'm for 45, and then I'll be
Yeah.
around for Q&A and discussion. Okay.
And the Q&A sometimes can really go long if you got a good engagement with the audience.
Yeah, yeah. And what I'll try is to engage the audience from up front, try to get them to say, what do you think this is? What do you think this is? But if they're just quiet or they're mute, I'll just carry on. Otherwise, the recording will be pushing. Guys, with that, I gotta get myself to Heathrow and to Dubai and then Sydney. So
Okay.
I will next
They're
time
going
I
to let
see
you
I'll-
in, are they?
Yeah. Well, so far I've got my test. So enjoy the rest of your discussion, and I might see you on. I think it's going to be straight as Monday or Tuesday, whenever the first is.
Right.
Whatever.
Okay.
Have
Good
a
trip.
Have a good trip.
Yep. Travel safe.
Okay, Jen, you had, you were going to be leaving early also, I think you said. Oh, Jen?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think Adriana, I don't know, did you have some things you wanted to share with the group?
Oh, well, do we want to talk about, are you leaving, when are you leaving, Jen?
Well, probably about 9:30.
Oh, okay. So, well, the only questions I had regarding our presentation were, because we're in the process of finalizing like the title and all that, and we haven't created the event yet. So for that, Ross, do you need the description, the title, the Zoom link, and we have a little like LinkedIn heading kind of picture to go
Yeah.
with it. So do you need all that when we create the event in order for you to get it on the agenda, or?
Given where we are in the process, if you create the event, I can copy the critical elements out of the event and use that for the agenda.
Okay, so, okay,
Yeah. So focus on the agenda, because in the event itself, you'll need the title and description, and that automatically creates a link.
okay. Title and description. Okay, and then I thought that I heard you say, Ross, that if we want to create an event on LinkedIn, you would do that, or did I mishear you?
I generally will create a link on the what's still called the Change Management Network page, and that's a
Okay.
portal to the Photocracy Network. I'll create the event there, tag you as a speaker, but if you are doing follow-up post, I think I've already given you admin rights. You can use that as a marketing portal for anything else you do post conference too.
Okay, and if we want to promote before the conference, we would just kind of post it on our own LinkedIn.
You could post it on your own LinkedIn. You can also do individual posts on the Change Management Network page itself.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and when you create, I think a lot of times if you create a post on the Change Management Network page, it also gives you an opportunity to post to your LinkedIn activity page also.
Okay,
So
okay,
basically, that page is designed strictly for a marketing portal. So as many things we push out there, the better, because that gets organic search across LinkedIn.
okay, great. That's good to know. I think that answers the questions that I had about the presentation.
Okay, jumping back, Reg, if you could pull your slides up, I want to do one quick check on the layout.
This isn't from my presentation. This
Just
is
any
just,
slide.
now if I bring it on to play,
Yep. Okay. In the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you're showing the speaker windows and the attendee
Yep.
windows.
Yep.
Go ahead and see if you can minimize that, because it's creating a block.
yeah, because on my screen, in my screen, there's plenty of room. So let me just try and,
Okay.
where are we?
Because John's screen did not have that. So he had his setup somehow different than yours. Okay, that created a single talking block. Then you can drag that down to the bottom, or basically that's still taking up some real estate in that area, but that is not much. Okay. Okay. All right. Very
And you
good.
can also, sorry, Ross, you can also completely make it disappear. So if you in the options at the top, you can actually select that neither the speaker or the audience is seen. So then you have a whole complete screen that's open.
Okay.
Let's
On
see if I
the
can find it.
okay, Reg has to do that in his screen, I guess.
Just looking now.
Okay. See, what I'm seeing there is just a black rectangle you popped up.
Yeah, hide floating meeting controls, hide
Yeah.
video panel. Maybe that's it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're seeing the meeting controls and, okay.
I've got nothing
that's
now.
it. Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, if you, and I want to go back and check my meeting controls.
Yeah. That basically on the top where it's got more, click on there, and then
Okay.
on the drop down, it's hide floating meeting controls.
Okay, I need you to release the screen because I
Yep.
can't find my controls. Okay,
Yep, done.
okay. You're at meetings and then,
So if you share screen,
oh, okay. Let me do that real quick. Give me a second here.
okay, now go up to the top where you view options.
Okay, hold it. Let me see. Okay. That's a floating, that's on the other one. Okay.
Yeah, so hide floating videos.
Yeah, well, okay, I'm working on two screens and the thing floats to a different spot. Okay.
But
Okay,
if you put it in play,
well, let's see, I've got,
so put your thing in play.
okay,
And now go up to the top and you get the drop down.
yeah,
And then on the right hand side, there should be 3 dots for more.
right, I'm there.
Drop this down and then hide floating panels or videos, whatever it is.
Oh, okay. Hide floating meeting controls. Okay, are you seeing any of my speaker controls right now?
Now I can't see what you're doing, but I'm seeing all of the screens at the moment.
Okay, you see the whole folding screen. Okay.
If you go to view options and drop,
I'm just playing here.
Yeah. where the 3 dots are,
Yeah, I'm there with the more.
so hide floating.
Right.
It might not work with yours because you're working on 2 screens, aren't you?
You're right. Okay, when I hide the floating meeting controls, I lose what's already floating with the mute stop all the way over to the 3 dots for the more. So that's
Okay, try the
already
other one then.
floating. And what it does, it basically takes off the screen. It tells me that I have to hit escape to be able to get back to it.
Yeah, no,
but
it's not the
it-
same one then.
Okay. Bottom line though, you're not seeing on what's displayed anything other than the full slide.
No, I'm not, because I'm working on a massive screen here and everything fits beautifully.
Okay, what about
I
Janet?
can't speak
Yeah.
for others on a smaller screen.
Okay, what about others? Are you seeing just a slide? Or are you seeing the speaker on the Zoom at all?
I only see the slide and everyone's picture off to the side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we're in gallery mode. If we go to
Yeah.
standard,
Okay,
it'll be
okay,
on top.
okay, okay. The speakers are there, but it's off the slide, so nothing's overlaying the slide.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Okay, that's kind of the ideal. Reg was showing something different though.
Yeah.
Reg was showing the overlay. Wonder if that's the difference between the two screens versus a single screen
Well, it
on
might
Zoom.
be. Give me control again.
Okay.
If you come out of yours,
Okay.
and I'll just go into one of these. All right. Now, if I've got nothing showing, yeah, just the screen.
I see your slide and I see the pictures on the side, but then I also see the drop down box
Okay.
without any words in it. It's just a black box.
Yeah, right where you're mousing over is a rectangle. Okay, now we've got a rectangle in the center. That's gone.
Yeah, that was because I got to.
Okay. Okay. At the very top, that's overlaying just a little bit of your slide that's showing is a small
That's
rectangle.
the screen sharing thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the screen. That's because I've got my cursor here. If I
Okay.
click on it,
Okay.
it'll go, or it should go away.
Okay.
I've now got you on the right hand side.
Okay. On the right hand side, we're just showing a black square at the upper
Yeah.
right hand corner. That's where your mouse is. That's showing as a black square for us.
Okay, so then what I need to do is just go down here. It should be gone.
Right. Yeah, those are gone. Where you have your floating menu bar at the top, drops down a little bit, and you still have a little bit of something as a small
Yeah,
rectangle
it
at the very
tells me
top.
that I'm screen sharing. That's what
Okay,
it
okay,
says.
yeah, it's really small. That doesn't interfere at all.
No, it
Okay.
shouldn't do. All right, so if I stop share.
Okay, very good. And hello, Hanali, good to see you. Looking good.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, you luckily I don't have any scarf, so I'm really grateful.
Yes.
The arm, but the rest is really beautifully. I'm very blessed.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Okay. Reg, the one comment I was thinking about when I was looking at your performance management, and it I don't know if it bothers me or I wonder about it, and that is the source of the power itself.
Okay.
And where I was thinking about this is the legitimate powers. That comes from the hierarchy and the assumptions that are embedded in the hierarchy. And
not necessarily hierarchy, but positions.
right, yes, right, positions. But again, it goes back to the assumptions of what a position in a hierarchy means.
In traditional organization, yes.
Right, right. And this is where I was thinking then, when you put in your Futocratic performance management chart,
Yep. Yep.
you had legitimate power.
Yep.
And I was thinking, says, what is legitimate power, and where is it created? And this is where
whatever. If I answer that question first, the first part is legitimate power. The CEO, the CFO, those positions by law exist, and so they have positional power over the whole company.
Okay.
That's their legitimate power. They're just two examples.
Okay. Now, where I was going though is, if you look at the principles.
Yeah.
Okay. Do the principles then create a different form of legitimate power, or can they?
They enable the personal power to make decisions. Basically,
okay. Is it
each individual? So you'll have a principle for decision making and so forth. That is the enabler of the personal power.
okay? Okay, an enabler versus the creation. Okay, let's talk about then resource power.
Yep.
Okay. Resource power is created at the level 1 by consensus, and it's influenced at level 2 at the purpose alignment team.
Nah, I mean, before level 1 can exist, you need resources because the company hasn't got anybody. And so
Right.
the initial resources are actually created by
Okay,
the positions who are able to start
Okay.
that business up. How
Okay.
you use the resources and allocate them amongst each other is then part of the collaboration within the principles and guidelines and processes.
okay, okay.
This is why I've shown those three
Yeah.
on the left, because they are the three things that you need in order for the organization to take off. How you use those and how you increase them, there will
Right.
be a process.
Okay,
At the end of the day, only only certain people will be allowed to increase resources within the principles of the organization.
okay, okay. So you have an issue of creation and then enablement and use.
Yeah. I mean, I'm having this discussion with one of my clients at the moment that their masters from up high in another country are saying you have to reduce your staff by X%. And so they now have to come down to the collaborative networks
Right,
to see how they can optimize their resources in order to meet this demand. And if they can do that, they themselves will shed the relevant number of people. If they can't do that, then it will come back here to the CEO to decide
okay,
X will go.
okay. Yeah, got that. Do we need to have then also another line from collaborative outcomes to business objectives? Or is it handled strictly through the dotted line between operational metrics and business objectives?
Yeah, because that you have the cycle
Yeah.
with the operational metrics,
Right,
and they are directly linked to the business. Now, normally, legitimate power can change the business objectives at any time. So maybe we could have that one as a double arrow. Yeah, that probably would fit in. And then the operational metrics would be realigned through the dotted line. Yeah, yeah.
okay. Okay. Let me ask the others then,
Yeah, what do the others think?
particularly your thoughts on the coalition power as we've talked about.
First of all, I like coalition better than political, because I think politics in an organization has a negative connotation. That's just my own personal view, but I like that. But my question about the coalition power and what John was also saying about the informal leaders. So these informal leaders have a sort of power where over the individual, as Reg was saying. How do you manage that part of the power? Is that something that you would talk about in the principles and guidelines and processes for the group? Or, like how do you stop those those informal leaders from wielding their power over the individual if they don't want that person to advance in the organization or be seen as somebody who is an expert or a specialist or has some knowledge that would be useful for everybody and can move up in the organization? I think I might be referring to, like, how do you stop a toxic relationship from happening between the informal leaders and the individual in the group?
Usually the groups, if we're now talking about the informal organization aspect of the coalition, then you stop going to those people if they're dysfunctional. This is where the referent power comes in. In an informal relationship, if some person is not adding value or meeting the needs of that group, then as we know from social media, they just click them out. Yeah. And it's the same in organizations. And so this is why the informal organization is very much more powerful than the formal organization, because the people have choice over who they decide is their informal leader, or groups. I mean, it's not just one leader, it's whoever can achieve what they're trying to achieve at that time. So it's sort of natural selection process. It's almost Darwinian, I think, in some senses. I mean, does that meet where you are coming from? What do you think?
No, that makes sense. I just for me personally, like ignoring somebody's email or not answering their phone call or something at work to me is, and maybe this is because of the type of organizations that I've worked in and how they've been set up in order to control, but I feel like that's something I'm going to get in trouble for if I don't respond to somebody about something.
This is a very, very sort of cultural thing, in the sense that where I am in Austria, it is a classic maneuver by just about everybody of that culture, the national culture, is if I don't want to do something, I just ignore it in the hope that it goes away, or if it's too difficult. And so it's very common never to get a response. And so this again brings back this dependent power. In your formal organization, if you're dependent on that person who just ignores it and hopes it's going to go away, then we've got mega problems. In the informal organization, then we will avoid that person because we know that person will behave in this way and will go in another direction to achieve what we're trying to achieve. And this is why the informal organization, I suggest, is much more powerful in many areas. There are some areas where this doesn't work, but this dependent power that people have is very important to understand.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree, because when you're dependent on one person to help you get a specific thing done and they're not responding to you and you can't go anywhere else, then it falls back on you that you're not doing your job properly. At least that's been my experience. So
yeah, and in a traditional performance management system, they don't take that into account because it's your outcome that's measured. And when I was working with the United Nations Industrial Organization, UNIDO, when they were designing their new performance system, what we suggested and what they did at the time, and I don't know whether they're still doing it because this was 20 years ago, that they include in that performance measurement the timeliness of the inputs required from others in order for you to achieve your work. And it wasn't set up so that you could blame somebody else for not delivering. It was a system so that their management could manage that relationship so that it worked and enabled others to achieve their outcomes. Because that was their biggest problem, like many bureaucratic organizations, things arrived too late and you were the one that got blamed. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And so this dependency flow is really, really important.
Do we need to give more clarity to what the coalition power is?
I mean, does everybody understand what we're trying to encapsulate in this context of a coalition power?
Let me go back. You know, when you say that the whole is more than the sum of the parts, what's the difference in when you take the whole minus the sum of the parts? How do you define that? That's what we're trying to define here. Is are we adequately defining it, or is it sufficiently defined just through the abstraction.
I mean, at its basic, a team that's effective is a coalition of power. It brings together all of those different attributes to achieve something. So
Right.
it's a coalition of activities, which by definition are power. And I see this coming together in the same way. It's harnessing disparate groups. They are disparate groups until they come together as a network.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And once they do that, then we start to get the power. Whilst they're separate and disparate and are more social groups, then there is no power in terms of organizational terms. But as soon as they come together with an aim to achieve something, then we get coalition power. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yep. Like I said, I'm up 99% there. I just worry about that 1% of being a little bit too abstract. Okay.
Well, let's explore it. I mean, what do you think, folks? What do you?
Can
Again,
you go back to your original model?
Okay. Which original model? The
That shows the, see, I forget what the title was.
the
these?
first,
Shows the elements of the power.
Yeah.
the first
These
slide.
here. Yeah. This one here.
Nope, not that one. There was more of a chart. That showed the
Oh,
interaction.
that was the
Futocracy for performance management.
that's the performance management one.
Right.
Okay.
In the Futocratic, or do you mean the original one, which was the traditional one?
I apologize, I'm not sure, but it had the different components of how the elements interact. You had the types of power on the left, and then you had let's see.
The one that the one we used
It
today, or
connects
the one
to
we used
all-
last week.
Yeah, it was one of the 3 slides you showed today,
Okay. Yeah, the Futocratic performance
Then you've
management.
got this one.
the performance management.
That's the performance management.
Okay.
This is your legitimate
Right.
power.
You're not showing anything right now.
No?
At least I'm not seeing anything.
No, it's just a big
Black
black
screen.
screen. Yep.
There we go.
You see it
There we
now?
go.
Yep. There we go.
Yep.
So I
Oh,
had
yeah,
2 thoughts.
that's right. Because
Yeah,
I wasn't
and-
showing my desktop. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got your speaker window on the upper right-hand corner along the top.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just doing that
Okay.
for now, but it's not blocking anything, or it shouldn't be blocking
No,
what you're seeing.
No, this block's part of the title.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had 2 thoughts. One was the directional nature of this performance manager. It's top down. So, I was wondering if there was another way that you could show the complexity of, because when you talk about the collaborative power, it seems like the power can come from the bottom up as well. And it's more fluid than the way that we traditionally think of power in organizations. So those were my 2 observations.
Let me see if I captured that. The coalition power here,
Mhm.
you're saying is top down.
No, overall, the way it looks when you look at this performance management is the power comes from the statement of purpose and then filters down to the collaboration. So I wasn't sure if that was your intention, to show a directional sense of power in organizations, because my understanding was that the power was no longer top down.
Which is why it's from the left through business objectives and operational metrics. It's coming from there. That's the reason for being in the business. And those are the powers that decide what the business is, the resources and the rewards that people get when they're hired. So that's the sort of positional stuff, if you like. And it's then when we have the objectives are set and the metrics to measure it, we then move across the principles and guidelines and processes, basically that's the methodology for handing over all this power to you as a personal power. And when you are working with a network, an informal network, then you end up with your coalition power, or even your formal networks. So the coalition power, that's what's missing here, I think, at the moment, because it shows the coalition power going into the network. Well, that makes sense, because that's how they work, by using coalition power and personal power.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So can level 1 influence the statement of purpose or the business objectives?
They cannot change the statement of purpose. That is the reason that the executives have created the business. They may want to have some influence on the objectives by bringing in new business, for example, that falls within the statement of purpose. So, for example, in my statement of purpose, if it was to discover and develop drugs for the benefit of mankind or whatever, then part of the level 1's job is to help identify and discover new types of drugs. That doesn't change the statement of purpose, but it may change the objectives, because they may have the potential for a drug in a very specific area, which may or may not be a good business area for the shareholders. And so then that would feed back through the network weaver to the purpose alignment team, who would discuss this, and then they would, with the executives, decide whether this is a business worth going into. So they have that form of influence, but they don't have control.
So there's limited power at different levels. That might
There are
be
different-
interesting to demonstrate the nature of the power of this new, because that seems like that's the shift. And also at the collaborative level, it seems like there's more flow to it. It can disperse quickly, and it can come together quickly, if that makes sense.
I think coalition and collaborative are two different things that maybe I'm confusing you. The networks are collaborative. Each work group or team in the network collaborates with the others. They have their own functions, their objectives to meet, and they will very often be sub-projects which interact with each other and so forth. So they must collaborate with each other, and the network weaver assists them, because the network weaver is part of the purpose alignment team, in order to keep up to date with each other, make sure that the way they're doing things, if they need to change the way they do something, how does that affect the rest of the network, and so on. So they have the power within that network to, through collaboration, actually change all their processes, the way they do things, provided they're meeting the objectives that have been set for them. They're also responsible for working with the purpose alignment team through the network weaver, the optimization of their resources. And so each one of these work groups can, according to peaks and troughs of demand, or the stages that they're at in the work they're doing, share resources throughout the network. And that's what I'm currently doing with an organization at the moment. It has some issues and difficulties, which we could go in on another day, but that's basically the principle of it. And now in a very large organization, you have the same constellation going on with maybe a different business unit, in terms of, if we take this large one here, this could be white goods, refrigerators, washing machines, things like this. Down here, this could be using similar sorts of technologies. They're looking at designing new types of motors and gears and things like this. So they have a relationship in the business, but they are actually in very, very different areas of the business. So they are a network within themselves, linked to this network, so that these people are getting the right motors and things for their white goods. And the Same here in terms of they can change the way they share their resources and so on. So this is the collaborative side. And even with external organizations, you get collaborations in designing packaging and things like this to reduce waste and so forth. So that's all about collaboration. What you have, though, is because this is now a coalition of working together overall, they have a collective power as a coalition. And so they can change an industry. And this is what's happening at the moment. Industries are changing through coalitions. And so the coalition part of the power is a collective form of power, whereas the collaboration is a process of activity and decision making. Does that difference make a, I mean, how does it make sense for you? Jen, did I differentiate them enough for you?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions on the content that we've been talking about at this point? Okay, let me shift gears a little bit then relative to another issue, and that is the complexity of work and difficulty of having to be disrupted in one project to take on work in another project. And it gets down to, is this a workflow issue, a developmental issue relative to learning new ways of capturing the way you understand and transition, or is there a need for a different approach to work? And where I'm thinking about different approaches to work, I'm thinking about how artificial intelligence can be harnessed such that the work is done through, might be trial and error within a constraint boundaries, and then the expert, instead of doing the work, focuses on identifying the constraints and what those constraints mean. Yep. And part of my thinking goes back to linear programming from years ago. The value in linear programming oftentimes is not the result of what is the optimum collection of variables and their settings, but what is at a limit there. Because if you alter the limits, you're able to alter the optimization. And with artificial intelligence, if you put together a list of all the limits within a framework and an objective, you can then experiment with all different possibilities and even start to throw random errors in to see how it would work. That kind of makes sense?
Dilemma I'm facing with clients at the moment.
Would that be sort of like doing the work in using an iterative process, excuse me? You know, like you put out something and then you know, you figure out where all the bugs are and then you go back and correct those bugs, much like they do with like the software updates and things like that with some technology now.
Well, it's actually a combination of three different things I'm thinking about. One is from complexity science to fitness landscape, where you may be on a local optimum And the way that they address that is they randomly jump to a different point to see whether there's an improvement. So if you're, say, example, on one mountaintop, you think that you're at an optimum, but it may be only local. And if you jump 20 miles to the west, you're on a different slope that then takes you upward, and you're able to then test whether it's a better optimum than you were before. So there's an incremental improvement, but there's also a randomness then to jump. You've also got, within the area of linear programming, an optimization process that clearly identifies what is the constraining elements of that optimum, and you could learn from that, such that it's not so much critical of where you are at the optimum point, but a learning process of what is constraining you, and then being able to focus on that constraint itself. Then an artificial intelligence would be the third component of being able to move massive amounts of trial and error to see what works, what doesn't work. And there's a little bit of randomness thrown in there, but it's basically an optimization problem in that you're able to set up an objective, let the program simulate multiple outcomes, identify what the constraints are, focus on those constraints, but then you can also do quality assurance testing by throwing randomness into the process to see how the system is able to then react to that. What you're then doing is you're changing the expertise of the person involved from designing the entire work process, and instead using the expertise to evaluate different outcomes and how those outcomes can be improved further. That then allows that person then, with interruptions, to be able to change from one project to another without having to reorient it themselves totally to get back going again on the original project. Reg, your thoughts on that of shifting work as approach?
My concern about that whole subject of the work, if we're moving more and more to a distinct split between manual work, where we need dexterity that machines can't give us, and we've got high level thinking brain work that computers haven't yet managed to get to, and it's unlikely they ever will in there. And the middle work is vanishing rapidly. So what you're talking about more here, I think, is the mental work. And I think we're currently reaching the boundary of capacity of the human brain in relationship to current technological support and approaches.
Right. Yeah. And what I'm thinking about is to do a different way of thinking about how to approach that work.
Yeah.
In which case it really employs artificial intelligence to develop something that is too complicated for a person to grasp the complexity at one time, but allow the computer to just run wild and let the expert then evaluate where it's running into problems and figure out new rules, new constraints, or adjusting the constraints.
I think it depends on the nature of the work.
Okay.
If the work is design work,
right,
this is quite difficult, because design work is all about experimentation. The AI side can bring information about, I don't know, the strengths of different materials and all the measurable things, if you like, of them on the material side. It can also bring in the results of prior attempts to design where it broke down and things like that. So we can get a lot of information there. what we can't get from at the moment from the technology is this ability to sort of think outside the box and reconsider the program and the problem from a first level principle. Machines still can't do this. And so when an engineer is designing something, they are forever going back to first principles at different stages within the same complexity, because you get to a certain point and you cannot move forward until you start to rethink what's stopping you from a first level principle.
Okay.
And to do that is really a lot of concentration on that specific piece of work. Now, if you take that person away from them and move them to another piece of work, because you're optimizing your resources now, you're now getting them to start thinking totally different again. And that takes time. And,
Okay.
and that's currently the problem that industry has.
If that shift, though, can that shift be limited to focusing on individual constraints? Because if you want to get to a new way of thinking, you've got to break some existing constraint and think differently from that perspective.
I might be able to answer that after the 7th of February. I had this discussion yesterday with some really top engineers in a particular business who are groundbreaking engineers. I mean, they really are pushing the boundaries of science. And on the 7th of February, I'm bringing 22 of them together. And part of our meeting is how do we deal with this current problem?
Yep. See what you're approaching it holistically, and that's starting to face the limits of human capacity to grasp that many interacting components.
Yep.
And if you want to go to first principles, you need to rethink some aspect. And there's a leap of maybe intuition a lot of times that's involved there. But I'm thinking that with artificial intelligence, with trial and error, can you limit the complexity for the human to grasp at any one time to better focus what limited mental capacity that there is on one part of the problem, come up with maybe some idea, and then start to test that within the AI again to see how it replicates within the simulation?
Not that I'm aware of. So for example, if you look at something like thermodynamics, you can model the existing knowledge of thermodynamics within certain conditions and run that through AI and other simulation processes. But they have to, the simulation is designed by the engineer in the first place. So that isn't done by AI. AI tries to make sense of the data of the results of it. And then you've got other variables, so that if you say, well, if we look at a different type of material to contain these thermodynamics, what's the likelihood? AI can't do that at the moment. I'm not saying
not without enlarging the database of possibilities.
It can, on the basis of simulations that are pre-programmed, and even with the learning methods that they've got now with AI, they're still not there yet. It's still very, people, I think, overestimate the power of AI at the moment.
Well, I agree with that. I'm just trying to figure out how to shift the magnitude of it so that you're interacting. That's not just mental capacity only. It's a maybe a leap of intuition, and then let the AI play with it. And to the extent that you need to keep adding more components, that's doable, because all you're doing is you're adding different rules and constraints to the, I guess, the list of requirements that the AI is playing within.
Yeah, and this comes back to the collaboration part. I'll give you an example of one that's live at the moment. We've got a group of people who specialize on AI. Okay? They're designing the algorithms and everything that kicks off the whole process of discovery. You then have another group of people who are designing situations in high engineering and thermal dynamics and stuff. And so they go to the AI people to say, look, how can we bring these together? So they're collaborating all the time. And then we come to HR and we say, right, we need now some people to work on this team. And they say, well, what are you looking for? Well, we look for chemists and all sorts, but we're not just looking for those types of people. We're looking for people who are able to use technology and are flexible, not in the traditional way of flexibility of being able to juggle the balls in the air and move from one thing to another. They're flexible in the way they view situations. And it's a different form of flexibility, which they're not taught. This is not in the education system. Yeah, it's a totally different mind approach. And until we can get those types of people, we're still going to struggle on this complexity problem. And I have no idea where we're going to get them. What we've started to do is try to put together a program to develop people who have the other attributes, so that we can help them understand. Because the problem with most people who come from a scientific world, irrespective of the direction, they come from a Newtonian linear world. And so there is no fantasy in their world. It's black and white almost, within boundaries of physics and all sorts of things. And we're saying to them, yes, that's wonderful, stay with it, but now we want to do it differently. We want to throw away the Newtonian world and the linear world. And they just look at you as if you're off another planet. Yeah. And that's the challenge we have with technology's sophistication at the moment and what we're trying to design.
Yeah. I just keep thinking there's something there if we explore it further.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I'm on the, I think it's about the 15th, around about the 15th of February, I start a 6-month program with 15 managers, scientists, basically, to see how we can do this. I have no idea what we'll be doing. I have none at all.
Yeah, because the way we've been doing it is not going to work.
No, that's why I can't say how I'm going to do it now. It's classic here and now stuff. This is our problem. How are we going to approach this? And my task is to challenge all their assumptions and keep away from this causation Newtonian linear world and get into effectuation and start to see things differently. And that's going to be an interesting, I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be long days, and we're locking ourselves away in a hotel for blocks of weeks during this 6 months. It's going to be fun. No idea what the outcome is going to be. Come and visit us if we're all ill.
Holly, did you want to add anything?
Say again?
I was just asking if Holly wanted to follow up with her chat comment.
Yes, no, I was just saying welcome to our world, because that's exactly what we're doing. But we're not doing it in the context of a specific problem. We're doing these experimentational thinking experiences, so to speak, outside of the functional area. So it's not in the same context. And then you start playing with these people, so they're not under pressure to perform, because like their mindset, that you start playing with their mindset without them feeling, they're not feeling threatened, because you're not doing it in context of their performance, of their contribution, of how smart they are. And we've done this with lots and lots of engineers and the likes, and initially you get resistance. The moment you start to play with them, they begin to connect the dots, and they start coming out of that linear Newtonian type thinking. And then the whole mind opens up. And Ross, you were talking about the intuition. It's things that they didn't even know they had access to. And because it's not that you measure them according to how smart they are or their knowledge, their expertise, there's no pressure. And it's through that type of play, I call it play, so it's, you know, it's very meaningful and purposeful. It's where they start, initially you get them, there's a bit of resistance, and then you start playing, and then more, they see what they're able to access in terms of other ways of thinking about something. And then in the end, you bring it back to the problem. So initially you don't focus on the problem or the dilemma that you want to solve. And it's amazing to be present to something like that. Now that's
Absolutely.
I just want to mention that.
Absolutely.
That makes me excited, because you can see, you see the transformation happening in them.
Yeah.
And you'll find that the engineers, the auditors, the legal guys, they're actually the guys in the end who think the most creatively, who think completely outside of the box. It's people that you don't expect to think like that. And they come up with these incredible, brilliant ideas then. But it's not in a space where there's pressure, like we have to solve this problem right now. What are we going to do? Because you're taking them out of the normal environment.
Yeah, it's good to hear, and maybe I need to talk to you more. I'm trying from both directions. I start off with in the way you've described there, and I get into Pooh's bridge to make decisions. You know, the great Pooh Bear thing, and they think I'm crazy at midnight. I torches standing on a bridge in the middle of winter making decisions. I mean, things like this. But then the second stage is where we bring that to real problems. And I agree. The legal people, actually, I find are the best, because their brain is used to taking disparate bits and trying to pull it together in a very different way to the scientists. So yeah, I'd like to talk to you more about how you do that, and to see what I can learn from you and whatever I can give you, because it is an area that's increasingly needed, because we're getting right on the boundary of the relationship between technology and our human capacity to cope. So we have to find new ways of thinking and doing.
Anything else people have to put on the table for discussion today?
I just have a question, and maybe it's because I haven't attended all the sessions until now, and I apologize for that. There's just one word, maybe it's just a personal thing, but when you speak about Futocracy, I was wondering the word performance management. Is there another way to present that? Because it still then goes to the old way of linear thinking, of the way we think about performance management. Whereas if you think in terms of especially human-centric organizations and how we organize ourselves in networks, the theme that has come up a lot for me and for us lately is contribution and participation levels. So you can frame it for people to contextualize it in terms of performance management, but isn't it time to evolve that perhaps?
I couldn't agree more. Ross and I have had many discussions here. There are many words that are used that come with a history, culture, for example, leadership, manager, all these words which arguably don't really exist in today's world in the context of how people view them and understand them. And performance management's the same. Performance management is really stuck in the old paradigm of strategic human resource management, where they still demand this, but it's crazy. It just doesn't work. And so I would love to have another form of words that brought in that what is necessary. You need checks and balances in organizations, that's for sure, particularly when you empower the teams and you give them this power, because they like to work with each other and they will create work which may not necessarily be good for the organization, and we know this for generations now. And so how do we, what term would you use instead of performance management for this checks and balances that we need?
just what comes up now, I have written about this many times, but comes up now is actualization management.
Okay.
Something in that order of, because you still measure it, you still monitor it. So it's not that you, but it's why you're monitoring it. So there, especially if you talk about personal power coming in and coalition power coming in, then so it's giving you, it takes a human being to another level when they realize, but I'm actually really part of actualizing the purpose of the organization, versus I'm just measured against whether I perform or not. So it might not be the right word, but it's just something that came up now as you were asking.
Yeah, I mean, because performance is, again, machine-based. It's all about have we put enough oil on there to get this damn machine to do what we want it to, and all the motivation theories that are so outdated in today's world. So actualization, again, still for me is about creating an environment that causes people to behave in a way. It's almost the same. And this is where we struggle, Ross and I, with this. I mean, I thought of optimization, but again, that is one of the activities of the purpose alignment team, but it doesn't necessarily give us all the checks and balances we want for the outcomes that we're looking for. That's a challenge now. I'm going to drive me mad. It is.
I will think about it the next few days. I'll sense into it, but I just have a sense when you speak personal power, for people to really shift people to sense their importance. So it's really their value, that they just a usable, like a resource. They're not just a resource, but they really bring something into the party to really actualize that purpose. So, but let me also sense into that. I've written about this, but now suddenly I'm in a different frame of mind. But I do feel there's something there. I'll let you know what comes up in the next few days.
Yeah, no, that would be really helpful. Really helpful.
We struggle greatly with language, because the language that we need just hasn't been invented yet. And you end up working with different adjectives and different combinations of words to try to get you close. But again, it's never exactly quite right in what we're trying to imply. But at the same time, if you invent a new word, then is it adequate? And what is it going to take for people to understand the new word too?
Yeah. I mean, I try and avoid the word culture in organizational terms. I use organizational behavior, which I think is more encompassing and nearer the truth of what we're trying to do. So where I can, but in some environments, people wouldn't understand what I'm talking about. So I have to stick with their organizational culture, although I hate it. Yeah. So this performance management is actually a good one. I'm going to give that some thought. Okay. I'm going to curse you. I won't sleep.
In my experience, I can just mention. So I just wanted to say that in my experience,
no, I've lost you. You're breaking up.
Hanley, you broke up on that?
No, I was just saying that in my experience, if one introduces it as their vocabulary,
yeah.
So you use something that they're comfortable with and they are known with, but then through the process, you move them to what you really want them to, this new vocabulary, so to speak. But through the experience, they get to that. Yeah. So it's always using something that's familiar to them, but when you take them through the process and through the experience, whatever you share with them, you get to that point where they actually discover, but this actually does make sense. And, they can then resonate with it, although it's a new term then.
Yeah. No, I agree totally. And that's why I subscribe to idioculture as a process of people behaving differently. Yeah. Adriana, Jen, have you got another word or description for performance management? Because I'm not going to let you sleep tonight either.
I off the top of my head, I can't think of a different word for it, but I like this idea because, like you said, all of these different words we use currently have all this history behind it, some with negative connotations, some with good. I don't know. Do we need to look, without getting too complex into psychology and neuroscience and all of that, but do we need to look at words used there that are positive that we can apply to this new language we want to create?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, performance management as a term is all about shareholder value because that's all it's there for. It's just to get alignment for shareholder value. So it's breaking that paradigm into what people are now looking for. This is this self-actualization, and they get that in part by delivering something that they feel they are part of and want to be, and so on. And it's capturing those elements so that we're guiding them, giving them feedback. I often use feedback loops with my students rather than performance management, but even a feedback loop is a machinery type approach, yeah, but it's a little kinder, I think, than performance management. What are your thoughts, Jen?
For me, I'm still going back to what is the purpose of it? Really, what is its function? So, and what is it that you're trying to accomplish? If it's, in the traditional performance management section, I know that you're trying to get away from that as far as the control. However, there still seems to be a need just in, looking at human behavior of needing to feel valued, needing to feel recognition for your work. So I'm still contemplating those elements. I have heard of the individual contracts where the collaborators, work together to hold each other accountable. So I'm not sure if you're thinking about the individual level on the collaborations, or if you're still thinking of having the leaders or, level, I forget with the Futocracy which way the levels go, but I think it's 3 and 2. If you're having members of those still trying to translate expectations and hold people accountable, then that's different than holding each other accountable. And then how do you want to reward accomplishments? So I'm not sure. I think for me that those questions kind of need to be answered first before I think of an overall name. Those
I mean,
are my
for me,
thoughts
it's all of
right
them.
now.
It's about the organization needs safeguards, otherwise it doesn't perform and it doesn't survive. The individuals need some form of guidance and motivation in terms of, are they delivering? It's good old expectancy theory. Am I achieving what I wanted to, and am I getting out of it what I hoped to when I took it on? And so part of it is about guidance. I mean, if you take an ideal performance management system from a textbook, it's about personal objectives and business objectives. So the personal ones is about self-development and all of that. In reality, it's not. It's a copy paste from last year and nothing's changed, and we send them on a mechanistic course and all this nonsense. But if we take it more to the self-actualization part and what people want from work, then that's one part of the feedback loop. Are you achieving what you want to achieve here? You're using a process of organization's requirement outcomes as part of your own development and delivery. And then you've got the organization side, so they feel comfortable. They feel comfortable that by allowing you to run their business for them, you're achieving what they need to achieve to stay in business. And so it's both. And for me, it doesn't matter where it's measured, whether it's measured at by line management in a hierarchy, traditional organization, or whether it's by the group themselves or how it's done. For me, that doesn't matter how it's measured. It's what is the process for at the organization and the individual level. And then you can decide how that process is designed to meet both those needs. But generically, this performance management label, I think, gives everybody this management by objectives mindset, which is so outdated, and it's built on soggy ground anyway. The whole theory of MBO, objective setting, he was way off mark when he did it, but that's another story. Yeah, that's a challenge, I think. That's a challenge.
Anything else for today?
Not from me. I'm going to carry on putting this together. What I got from today was the coalition part. I need to clarify and make that a bit clearer for people. In terms of the performance management for Futocracy, as an alternative approach,
right,
is to look at whether there's an inference of hierarchy in there or not, and how that works. So I need to revisit that. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Anything else relative to the conference next week? Okay, Reg, I'll pass you my slides going forward. Actually, what I'll probably do is I'll probably put the keynote itself on the shared drive, so you can walk through the the slide. The keynote is too big to be able to email.
It's always the case with this stuff nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank heavens for Teams and Dropboxes and all the other
Yeah,
things.
Yeah, so I'll put it out on the OneDrive, so you can. I'm not to the point where I have the animation yet, but I'm going to work on that today. Okay. Anything else for the group today?
Not from my side, no.
Okay.
No.
Did you want to have a follow-up conversation today, Reg, or just as needed?
What for you and I were, because I'm okay with what we've got today.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'll look again at the things I've just said, and then I'll drop you a line, and if we need to link up, we can. Hannah-Lee, what I'd like to do is have a short time with you on to discuss this approach to freeing up these wonderful engineers at some mutually convenient time. So I'll drop you a message if that's okay.
Right, that's perfect.
We can have a discuss of that. Yeah, I'll look forward to that. Good, excellent. Okay. And you're the other side of the world, aren't you?
I'm in South Africa at the moment. Yes, I'm supposed to be.
Not so bad. That's all.
I'm supposed to be in Switzerland, but I'm not there yet. But I'm still in South Africa. Yes.
Okay, which part?
Seelisberg.
All right, because I did a lot in Joburg and Cape Town.
But I'm Johannesburg currently at the moment. But I'm sort of Seelisberg, but because of COVID, I've still been stuck here.
Okay, because I did a lot in Joburg and Cape Town. It was great fun. I love it there. I really do. I'm envious of you being there, I must admit.
Particularly this time.
You can all come on a project here. We can all.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Okie dokie. Thanks for all of you, and look forward to the next session.
Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.